Well, welcome back to The Mouse and Men, where we explore the grown-up side of Disney. You can find us on social media at The Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also find us on YouTube, where we broadcast the podcast. Or just go to themouseandmen.com, where you can find links to all of our social media, plus get our top 10 list of things for grown-ups to do at Walt Disney World. I'm Bradley. Here with me today is my co-caster, Chris. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. Hey, we had such a good conversation last week talking to Jonathan Alvarado about his experience at the Walt Disney campus down there in the Orlando area, all that he does behind the scenes working with lighting and everything. But he brought up these 4 keys that Disney makes all their decisions by, and it blew me away. It was kind of the first time I'd ever heard about that. You had heard about it before, but when we got off the interview with Jonathan, we thought, let's talk about that next week, because there's so much that you can dig and mine and find gold when Disney uses their heads to come up with a list like this. So I would love to talk more about the 4 keys today. You said you'd like to talk about it too. So I think without further ado, let's dive into the 4 keys of Disney and why it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
So in the intro, we were talking about 4 keys, and you and I immediately, when we got off the interview last week, we started talking about it and how important these are. It kind of blew my mind, and you were familiar with them before last week when we talked to Jonathan, but I would love for you, if you could today, for me and our audience, walk us through these 4 keys and how it kind of relates to Disney prioritizing decisions that they have to make through the park and even before you get there, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with these because when I was working in customer service, I thought, who has some of the best customer service in the world? Well, it's Disney.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that they take care of their customers is evident in how many people come back over and over and over again. So I started reading some books by Lee Cockrell, former VP of operations at Walt Disney World. That led to a lot of other stuff as well. But I kept hearing from a lot of people who worked at Disney, including in Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime, that just came out, I believe in October, maybe of 2020. But they keep talking about these 4 keys, and it's the 4 keys that drive everything Disney does. The first key is safety, and there's a particular order to this. The first key is safety. The second key is courtesy. The third key is show. And the 4th key is efficiency. And I love it. I think it's applicable in so many different areas. But I've loved studying these 4 keys that Disney has.
Okay, so you and I were talking off mic here right before we got started about how, for me, when I usually go to Disney, the idea of safety being their first priority, it's so taken care of for me from a Disney perspective that I never even really think about it. I get on rides without having to check, am I going to be safe on this ride? Because I know that Disney's got me. I book a whole, thousands of dollars trip for my entire family to go spend a week at Disney, because I know that I'm just going to be taken care of once I get there. It's one of those kind of things that, like, once I put the money down, then I can forget it and just enjoy myself. Yeah. And that's one of the beautiful things of Disney. Whereas there are other places that I go, like if I'm in charge of my own vacation to go to the beach or something like that, I am in charge of my own safety and my family's safety. So I have to think through things of like, when do we go? Do we go during hurricane season? Do I take my family to this particular restaurant? Do we go down this street, kind of thing? But where I know is Disney, they do all that for me. And so it's weird to be in a pandemic where I actually have to think through the safety issues before planning a trip to Disney, which makes even more sense why they put that as their first priority in the 4 keys.
Yeah. And, listening to the podcast is called Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockrell. There is a relation to Lee Cockrell. This is Lee Cockrell's son. Dan Cockrell was VP of 3 of the Ford parks.
Wow.
VP of Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Hollywood studios at different times, just kind of moved around. But I think he's had 20 some odd roles at Disney, and then just retired a couple of years ago. But on his podcast, he talks about the safety measures that they take. And they even said, look, we have to make sure that people are going through these checks every day, because one of the checks is for fire extinguishers at every attraction. And how do we know the same person who either opened yesterday or more likely closed yesterday? Maybe they closed yesterday, opening today. They need to make sure that fire extinguisher is still there, even though they were the last person to lock up and the first one to unlock this morning.
Wow.
So they said, okay, we need to, they said, hey, we're just going to take a sticky note and say, when you see this, please bring it to your manager.
Oh, smart.
And it's very much like when Van Halen was playing a concert. They had their contract with the venue, and in the rider, in the middle, they would say, in the green room, we want M&Ms, but no brown M&Ms. And a lot of people said, what? They're prima donnas.
What a diva move. Yeah.
Yeah. And the manager for Van Halen said, it wasn't that they didn't want brown M&Ms. It was that if we knew when we walked into the green room, if there are no brown M&Ms, they read that entire contract, because they were doing some things with pyrotechnics and lighting rigs that had to be very, very deliberate in how they were set up for safety reasons. And if they saw brown M&Ms, they said, well, we know you didn't read the whole contract, so we don't trust that you set things up safely.
Wow.
So that is Disney's first key. And I'll also say this too. Before the pandemic, there was some bad PR because a log flume, or one of the flumes, started to sink on one of the rides. It may have been Splash Mountain, but don't quote me on that. And the one of the riders jumped out and was filming it on Instagram or something. And you hear the cast member say, hey, stay in the flume. And they're like, why are we going to stay in the flume? It's sinking. But as I stepped back, I said, okay, if they stay in the flume, we know, okay, the water's only a foot deep, so their feet are going to get wet. But is that better or worse than them trying to get out? Everything's slick and slippery and somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
What's more important? So look, I don't know what Disney's investigation into that was, if the cast member acted appropriately or not, but I can see how, if I'm in that situation, it's like, hey, stay seated. Your shoes are going to get wet. Hold your cell phones, hold your valuables up above, but they're not going to sink in so far that they have to swim.
Right.
But that's how safety comes first. They're always thinking about how to keep the guests safe.
See that, and that's so smart, which feels like that it's just a natural progression into the next one. Could you introduce, I mean, I know that you've already introduced the subject, but maybe go into a little bit more detail of why courtesy is number 2?
Yeah. So once people's safety is taken care of, then it's all about courtesy, because think of inviting guests in to your house. I had guests in my house recently, and I'm not going to say, hey, only take a 5-minute hot shower. We need to conserve the hot water or whatever. No, I'm going to extend that courtesy. And that may mean for me taking a cold shower. I don't mind those. But that's a different story. But it's thinking through that, does a guest in my house want seconds? Well, I'm going to give them seconds before I give myself seconds.
Makes sense.
It's extending that courtesy as long as it's safe. And that can be, at the detriment to either of the keys that follow. So once people are safe, make sure you're courteous, giving them a smile, greeting them. I'll tell this to anybody. If you want to feel celebrated on your birthday, go to Disney World. We've been once or twice for my wife's birthday. You get a pin that you can wear around that says, it's my birthday or something like that. So you can wear that around. I mean, just about every cast member who sees you is going to say happy birthday. A lot of guests, when you're standing in line, will see that and also wish you happy birthday. We were walking back and forth. I believe it was in Adventureland. We may have been doing the Pirates Adventure scavenger hunt.
Right.
And the same cast member, every time we walked by, said, "Hey, happy birthday again." Every time. And
that's great.
That is courtesy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
That's what really speaks Disney to me. That because I never really have to think of safety for me and my family when it comes to Disney, because that's just always a given, that the courtesy is the first thing that I notice that blows me away. It's almost like going to Chick-fil-A versus another fast food restaurant. I always know when I ask for something at Chick-fil-A, I always get my pleasure instead of whatever, dude, or you got it, bro, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I just know, like, my kids have grown up going to Chick-fil-A knowing that if they ask for something, they're going to not only get it, but get a my pleasure added to it. And that's just such a different level of courteousness and professionalism when it comes to a dining experience. Now, Disney does it on a whole other level because they have so many working parts, but it always blows me away, that kind of courtesy that people go out of their way to take care of me and my loved ones when I'm in the parks. It's just always amazing.
Yeah, I really love it because that is what people notice as the Disney difference. And like you said, you don't notice the safety because it's not as evident as courtesy until it's needed. And that is when that safety really kicks in, because you can see that Disney is worried about people's safety. You saw it on September 11th. They had to shut down the parks because they didn't know who's going to be targeted next. So they just want to get people out of centralized locations. Look, it was not very efficient. It wasn't courteous for people who paid good money to tell them to go back to the resorts, but they were courteous in how they executed it, but it was for everyone's safety. And so those are the times that you realize, okay, they're here to take care of us. I mean, from a business standpoint, if you kill off all your customers, you're going to get a bad reputation. Whereas if you really take care of your customers, especially in tough times, or take care of your employees, as Jonathan talked about last week, that spreads, and that's great marketing. That's great PR. And that can only happen if safety is first.
Going back to something that we're going to mention in our plussing segment, but just to reiterate a point of a podcast that I was listening to, a podcast called Creating Disney Magic. They were talking about these 4 keys, and they said that something like if you had a 99% success rate, that sounds really good. But when you start looking at it from a numbers game that Disney has to do, knowing that not only do more than 99 out of 100 people go into the parks expecting to stay safe, 100% of the people expect to be safe. And then you extrapolate that out to how many millions of people that visit the Walt Disney World, the Disneyland out in California, all the other places from around the world, how many people you're dealing with if only 1% of the people get hurt. Like that's thousands and thousands and thousands of people per year, which that only 1% getting injured or not being safe at the parks will ultimately kill all the 99% that are safe, because word gets out that if you don't feel safe, it's kind of one of the reasons that Walt Disney created Disneyland and then Disney World in the first place, is to provide a safe, enjoyable place for his children to go have a theme park experience, because the ones that he saw around him were kind of gross, they're kind of grimy, they didn't feel very safe. And so he wanted to provide a place for families to be able to go and experience something and not have to worry about those things that he was worrying about for himself and his children when he was raising them.
You're exactly right. So one of the questions that he asked as he's planning Disneyland is, how many times are the bathrooms cleaned at, these other places, fairs, whatever? And somebody said once a day. And he said, all right, we're going to start with twice a day. Well, why? Well, if we have clean bathrooms, It's kind of like the fire extinguisher thing. If we have clean bathrooms, that's something visible. And we know when parents see clean bathrooms, they'll say, hey, the rest of the park must be clean.
Yeah.
If
If
they
they're going
know,
through this amount of detail for that. Yeah.
yeah, if we know that they're checking the fire extinguisher every morning at every ride at the beginning of every shift, if we know that they're taking out the brown M&Ms, we know they've read the whole contract, they've taken care of all of our safety issues. You're exactly right. And you know, if you think, okay, just 1 million people, 99% of people safe, don't get hurt. If even just 1% of that gets hurt, for 1 million people total, 10%, I mean, 1% of that is still 10,000 people.
10,000 people. Yeah. Yeah.
0.1% is still 1,000 people. That's still a lot of people getting hurt out of 1 million people going to your parks. And they have a lot more than 1 million people going to their parks every year.
Yeah.
So first key is safety. Second key is courtesy. Let's move on to the third key, which is show. And as Jonathan talked to us last week, he said, you know, it's all a show. Everything about the parks, it's a movie, it's a theater production, all come to life. And now you're not just watching it, you're in the midst of it, which is why I want to get down to Galaxy's Edge, because every time Disney does something new in their parks, it gets just more immersive.
Yeah.
So I want to see that, because they put on a show, and Walt Disney was not satisfied with how the show was being executed at Disneyland, because he built this park and he's got people who have to get from, you know, I think it was somebody had taken a break and went over to get food at one of the places, probably over in Adventureland. And he's in his Tomorrowland outfit, which is very Space Rangery kind of attire.
Yeah.
And so he's walking through this land that kind of looks like, you know, Adventureland. It's pirates, it's jungle, it's not outer space. And so it just kind of breaks down the illusion.
Yes.
So Walt Disney said, okay, we are going to create something different when we build Disney World in Orlando. And the Magic Kingdom is actually built up a level. You can't dig down in Florida because of the water table. So he built everything up on top of all these tunnels.
That's so wild to me.
So the cast members come in, they enter into the tunnels underneath, and they can go all underneath the Magic Kingdom and pop up where they need to be. Now, Epcot is not this way. I mean, I don't think any of the other parks are this way. Epcot, it actually has a road around the back. So the cast members come in, and because it's a big circle, they can kind of come in from the edge.
Gotcha.
And go to their different pavilions. Up front, they can kind of filter through, and the theming is a little bit more the same, so they can kind of make their way to their post there. I'm not quite sure how Hollywood Studios or Animal Kingdom are, but each park was not designed the same way, because the show is a little bit different. The show requires something a little bit different. But that is their third point. So once safety is accounted for, once they make sure they're being courteous to all their guests, they want to make sure they're putting on a good show. You know, their costumes are perfect. They're wearing their name tag. They're in their character. That show must go on.
Yeah, and I think that's so brilliant. And Jonathan mentioned it last week that, like, okay, even when we have an issue that could be an issue of safety, it doesn't mean that that we're canceling everything else. We've got levels and tiers of different plans that we can do. But like for him, setting off pyrotechnics and lighting sequences and all this kind of stuff at very specific time. If the weather is inclement and they're doing something outdoors, maybe there is a version to where they give you the show, but a light version of it, so that then they don't risk one portion of the safety. And so the show still goes on as much as it can until it gets to a level to where either they can't be courteous in providing that or there's a safety issue. But I love that the show is always happening. And for something like Disney, it's not just for an individual ride or a fireworks show like Fantasmic at the end of the day. It is from the minute that you are picking up the phone to book your vacation to the minute that you arrive on site, to getting in your hotel room, to going to the parks for the first time, the rides in between with the trams. Everything is part of the Disney show of keeping this illusion going that you're here, we're happy about it, we're safe about it, and we're going to give you the best vacation possible. Could you imagine the amount of logistics that goes into making sure that all of those are being enacted? And we haven't even gotten to the fourth one yet,
right?
Which is after show.
Yeah. So after show is efficiency. And Jonathan had a great illustration for this. As you're walking down Main Street in the Magic Kingdom, they've got all these doors open and it's pumping AC out into the street.
Yeah.
So it's not very efficient for them to have that AC just blowing out into the hot Florida air. But it is a courtesy to their guests. Something else is, when you check in at a hotel, these people know a lot of different things about a lot of different things. And if you call in, I can't remember the last time I called into Disney, having to change reservations or something, but it's always more efficient from a business standpoint to have a person who is an expert in all these little things.
Oh yeah. Right.
But it's not the same for the customer as if I can call in and get all my answers from one person. So if you can sacrifice just a little bit of efficiency, I mean, we need some efficiency so that we're not just blowing money.
Sure.
But making sure that efficiency is, not taking away from people's safety.
Yeah.
From being courteous and from putting on a good show.
Yeah.
Okay. Once we take care of those three, let's be efficient as possible, but not hindering any of those three. And I think when you put those together, it makes Disney different from a lot of other theme parks, from a lot of other entertainment companies. It just helps Disney stand out.
Yeah. And if you think of it like we're going to overlay different layers of a customer experience to make sure that they have the best time possible, it really does start with that hierarchy of like, okay, the guest is safe. They don't have to think about that. They know that Disney's going to take care of them. It's kind of like me with my family. I know that Disney's going to be there. I know that regardless of if the cast member that I talk to, if I ask them a question, even if they don't have an answer, they'll sit there and they'll listen to me and they'll pay attention while I'm talking. They won't go off onto their phone or go try to find an answer while I'm in the middle of it. But even if they don't have the answer, they go, let me find out for you. It's not, oh, I don't know. It's always, let me look into that. So it takes the burden off of me, the customer, to have to do more work because they take that on for themselves of being safe, being courteous, and then also staying in character. Even if it's a cast member that's behind the desk at one of the resorts, they stay in character as a person who is the professional on Disney's behalf behind this desk while this guest is checking in. And so I feel like I'm taken care of there. But other places that I go, if I ask a question or I'm checking in, it's almost as if they are looking at me like as a number and they just want to speed me through so they can get to the next person so they can go on break. And I can feel that. And I feel like as a customer of those other places, I'm then having to putting on more responsibility in that area. Whereas in Disney's experience, I feel like they know that I've paid to be taken care of. So they take the burden off of me, which is very courteous. I feel like that I'm still in the show of Disney and the efficiency. Sometimes they go out of their way to meet a need of mine, but that makes me want to be a fan and a return customer over and over again because I'm always taken care of.
Yep. I think it's a great way to take care of your customers with these 4 keys. I think it's just a great business model, and I think it can really apply to a lot of different areas. So, this is one of the many reasons that I love looking to Disney leaders and the Disney company for a lot of business insight, for a lot of just management insight. They've done a really good job of pulling this together, really thinking about how do we do this better, not for us, but for our customers, because if we do it better for our customers, they will take care of us.
Yeah, I think that's so smart, and actually leads into our plussing for this week.
Plussings.
So, Chris, tell me about plussing.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about these 4 keys of safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. And one of the things that I heard about this last week, and it was kind of the first time that I'd ever heard about it. And I did some research, and because they're Disney, there's plenty of research out there to be had, because they don't shy away from putting these things out into the public, which is another reason why I feel taken care of by the Disney organization in all areas. Whether I'm sitting at home watching Disney Plus or I'm going to one of the parks, I know that a Disney experience to me is an up-leveled experience. And one of the places that we have learned more about a lot of the business of Disney is a podcast called Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockrell. And it's co-hosted by one of our buddies, Jody Mabry, who's the co-host, and he brings on Lee Cockrell, who I know that you have more information about his what he used to do for the Disney company. So if you could fill us in as well there, that'd be awesome.
So Lee Cockrell started with Hilton Hotels, later moved to Marriott, all through the food and beverage portion of hotels, then was brought to Disney to help open Disneyland Paris.
Wow.
After the success of Disneyland Paris, it got off to a rocky start, but he helped things get smoothed out there. They brought Lee Cockrell to Orlando, where he then became VP of operations for all of Walt Disney World. I believe he had 40,000 people reporting to him. And so he has some great insight into management. And he says, look, I've done it wrong in the past, but I've learned from it. And so he had developed a reputation of having done it well. And that's what got him to Disney. And so, he's got this podcast co-hosted with Jody Mayberry, and it's called Creating Disney Magic, because they talk about how you can create magic just like Disney does in any organization you lead. It's a great source for management, business acumen. But there is an episode from July 2019. I believe it's July 2019, about implementing these 4 keys in any business. And they use the neighborhood corner pharmacy, corner store as, okay, how can you apply this to something that doesn't seem to be anything like Walt Disney World or the Disney company? And I love that, because they put these ideas into practice. So plussing this week, go check out Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockrell, hosted by Jody Mayberry, wherever you enjoy podcasts.
Yeah, and they have been putting out podcasts weekly for the last 6-ish years. I think they started in 2015, and they're still going strong today. And so in 2021, just 4 or 5 episodes per month, once a week. They're always over there creating Disney magic. And so us being a podcast about Disney, we also want to highlight other forms of entertainment about Disney too. And so this week, please go check out Creating Disney Magic with Lee Cockrell and Jody Mabry.
Yes. And don't be afraid to go check out themouseandmen.com, because there you can find our top 10 things for grown-ups to do at Walt Disney World. You can also find links to all of our social media, or you can just find us at The Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on YouTube, where we broadcast the podcast. And look, the Disney keys are a fantastic way to think about what you do at work. I think they can apply to just about anybody. And the only reason that they came up with these things is because they really focused on it. Because they focused on families and they focused on this little childlike nature inside of all of us. So that's just a reminder to not grow up too fast.
But just like all these 4 keys, learning more about all these things, you can go deeper, more thoroughly, learning about an organization like Disney, but you got to keep exploring.